I couldn't keep it all bottled up anymore. The weight of my suspicions was suffocating me, and I needed someone to talk to. Someone who wouldn't judge me for the paranoia that had taken root in my mind. That's how I found myself sitting across from Ethan at our usual bar, the dim light casting shadows over his face as he sipped his whiskey. Ethan had been my closest friend for years, the kind of guy who could see through the bullshit and tell you exactly what you didn't want to hear. He'd been through his own share of heartbreak, a messy divorce that left him bitter, but wiser. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. "I don't know, man," I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "Something's not right with Julia. She's distant, secretive. I can't shake the feeling that she's hiding something." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "You're sure you're not just overthinking this? I mean, marriage isn't always smooth sailing. Maybe she's just stressed." I shook my head, the knot in my chest tightening. "It's more than that. The late nights, the phone calls she won't explain. I feel like I'm losing her, Ethan, and I don't know what to do." He sighed, setting his glass down with a soft clink. "Look, Kenneth, I've been where you are, and trust me, jumping to conclusions without proof will only make things worse. If you really think something's going on, you need to find out the truth. But be careful. Once you open that door, there's no going back." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew he was right, but the thought of uncovering the truth terrified me. What if I found something I couldn't handle? What if my worst fears were confirmed? Ethan's voice softened, a rare moment of vulnerability breaking through his usual tough exterior. "Just don't let this consume you, man. I've seen what that kind of obsession can do to a person. It's not worth losing yourself over." I nodded, but deep down, I knew I was already in too deep. The doubts had taken root, and there was no turning back now. Ethan's advice stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I couldn't confront Julia without proof, but I couldn't keep living in this limbo either. That's when I decided to hire Claire. Claire wasn't what I expected. When I walked into her office, I was greeted by a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She didn't waste time with pleasantries, cutting straight to the point as she leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "So, you think your wife's cheating on you?" she said bluntly, her tone devoid of judgment. I flinched at the word, but I nodded. "I don't know for sure. I need to know the truth." Claire studied me for a moment, her gaze piercing. "Most people who come to me already have their minds made up. They're just looking for confirmation. Are you sure you're ready for whatever I might find?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Was I ready? Could I handle the truth if it shattered the life I thought I had? "I need to know," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, pulling out a notepad and pen. "All right, tell me everything. Her schedule, her habits, anything that seems off. The more details you give me, the better." As I recounted the late nights, the secretive phone calls, and the growing distance between us, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. For the first time, I was taking action, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line I could never uncross. Before I left, Claire gave me one last piece of advice. "Be careful what you wish for, Kenneth. The truth has a way of changing everything." While Claire worked on uncovering the truth, I found myself spiraling deeper into my own thoughts. The house felt emptier than ever, the silence oppressive. That's when I made the mistake of reaching out to Sarah. Sarah was an old flame, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. We'd parted on good terms, but there had always been an unspoken connection between us, a spark that never quite faded. I told myself I just needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't tangled up in the mess of my current life. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe, and the moment I saw her, I felt a pang of guilt. She looked just as I remembered, warm, kind, and effortlessly beautiful. Kenneth, she said, her smile genuine. It's been so long. How are you? I hesitated, unsure of how much to share. But as the conversation flowed, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected. I told her about Julia, about the doubts that were eating away at me, and she listened with a patience that felt like a balm to my wounded soul. You deserve to be happy, she said softly, her hand brushing mine. Don't let this destroy you. Her words lingered in my mind long after we parted ways. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or the temptation of a fresh start. But as I drove home, guilt clawed at me. How could I condemn Julia for betraying me when I was teetering on the edge of doing the same? Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house became unbearable. Claire's updates were sparse, each one leaving me more on edge than the last. Then, one evening, I received a call that changed everything. I found something, Claire said, her voice cautious. But I think you need to see it for yourself. She sent me an email with a series of photos attached. My hands trembled as I opened them, my heart pounding in my chest. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Julia sitting across from a man at a cafe, their heads bent close together in conversation. It wasn't definitive proof of an affair, but it was enough to send me spiraling. The doubts, the paranoia, the sleepless nights. It all came crashing down in a wave of anger and despair. That night I confronted Julia. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The photos, the late nights, the lies. I laid it all out, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. She denied everything, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. Kenneth, it's not what you think, I swear. But I couldn't hear her over the roar of my own emotions. The trust we'd built, the life we'd shared. It all felt like a cruel joke. As I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me, one thought consumed me. I had to know the truth, no matter the cost.